Okay, we're going old media today. Hey, I'm New Media Boy. So you clicked on this video, you know, you read the title, you know what it's about. So we'll just jump into it, I guess. You want to develop film in your own home. And that's completely valid. Developing film can be a very expensive endeavor if you're going through local shops to get your film developed. So I've compiled a list of things that you are going to need to get started developing film in your own home. First thing you're going to need is your developing kit. And I went with the Cinestill C-41. I think it's the C-41 processing kit. It's a powder kit. And I'm going to be mixing those chemicals later on in this video. So the next thing you're going to need is 3 separate funnels. And you need 3 separate funnels because you don't want to mix up your chemical. You could taint your developer with the Blix and it would make it less effective when you reuse it. So you want 3 separate funnels. You want to label each one for the developer, one for the Blix, and one for the stop bath or photo flow or whatever you want to call it. You want to keep those separate for each chemical so you don't ruin your developer. The next thing you're going to need is a light tight bag. It'll allow you to transfer your film from the canister to a developing tank in a light tight area so you don't expose it to light and ruin your film. And with that bag, you're going to need a film canister opener and you're going to need a developing tank. Next thing I suggest you get if you're looking to do this would be nice gloves, because these chemicals are really not good for your skin. I think Blix can cause cancer if you have prolonged contact to it, so I would recommend getting some latex gloves or something of the sort. Next thing you're going to need, kind of an obvious thing, but you're going to need access to hot running water so you can get your chemicals up to temperature. I think this kit needs to be at 103 degrees to develop. So what I usually do is I throw them in my bathroom sink and I run hot water over them, and I'll wait a little bit and then check it with a thermometer. When it gets up to 103 degrees, I know that I'm ready to develop. Did I already say you need a thermometer? You're gonna need a thermometer. This is not gonna be professional at all, but I really hope it helps somebody. Another pretty obvious thing you're going to need is a place to hang your film to dry when you're done. So what I usually do is when I'm finished developing, I take, this is a good thing, you're going to need clothespins, probably, or some type of clamp to hold your film up. I usually take my film out of my canister when it's all developed, and then I hang it from the top of my shower, and I put a little clothespin on it so it can stay there. It takes about 3 or so hours. I usually try to develop right after I shower, so the room is already warm and steamy and all the dust in the bathroom has already settled, right? And that way I know that there's not going to be much dust floating around in the air to attach itself to my film while it's drying. That's a little New Media Boy pro tip for you. And so I usually hang up my film to dry for a couple of hours, and I'll leave the fan in my bathroom running so we get some airflow from under the door and up through the ceiling to help dry the film a little bit faster. I'm not sure if it really helps all that much, but it might. I don't this is not scientific in any way. So you're gonna need a place to hang your film to dry. You're gonna need 3 separate bottles for your chemicals, and you can find the proper size bottle for whatever size developing kit you get. They're usually marked in milliliters, ml, I don't know, whatever that measures. But I bought brown glass bottles because I think I read somewhere that you shouldn't expose these chemicals to light very much. So when you do store them, if you don't have dark bottles, you're going to want to store them in a dark place. So I went with dark glass bottles, but I still store them in a cabinet. And these bottles are insert size somewhere here. And the last thing that you're gonna need is film archival sleeves. And I mean, depending on what, size film you're developing, you could be developing 35 millimeter or 120, or, I don't know, you might be developing 110 film, for all I know. So, you're going to need sleeves that correspond to those sizes of film. And, film archival sleeves also come in different sizes. I think mine are, like, my 35 millimeter sleeves are for 5 negatives per slot. So I usually cut my film in strips of 5, 5 frames on each cut. Yeah, that's all you're going to need. Hopefully, if I did what I was supposed to do, I have links in the description, and they might be affiliate links. So, if you like what I do here and you want to support what I do in some way, if you buy the supplies from those links in the description, I might get a little kickback from those purchases, which would be really cool, since how I can't monetize this channel yet. But yeah, I'm doing this all for free because this is what I love to do, and it would really mean a lot if you supported me in that way. And if you can't support me that way and you want to buy cheaper items than the ones that I have listed in the description, go ahead and do that. I just ask, maybe leave a like on this video or subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see what I do in the future. Yeah. In the next segment, I'm going to be mixing those chemicals, and then I will do a segment where I try to explain how to get the film out of the canister and into your developing tank, and then I'll show the process of how I develop film in my bathroom. Maybe in the next video I will talk about scanning film. I got my film scanner right down here. It's an Epson V600, and if you can't afford an Epson V600, there are tons of other methods to scan your film, so maybe I'll cover some of those. I'm so excited to do this. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So the first thing I did to start mixing these chemicals was empty out my old bottles. This is the Cinestill packet here. And I emptied out the old bottles into a plastic container so they can be disposed of properly. The next thing I did was rinse out the bottles thoroughly so they were clean for the new chemicals. Alright, and the first step for mixing this kit is to measure out 1,000 milliliters of distilled water. And then heat that water up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And I made a little mistake here while reading the directions, because it says to add water to the mixture after you start mixing it. And I thought that it meant to not heat up the water that you were adding, but you're going to heat up all of the water. The water I left on the counter there was a mistake. It didn't affect anything in the long run though, because I've developed 4 rolls already on these chemicals.
It probably won't take long to heat that up.
No.
Not much.
Not at all. Here I am opening up packet A for the color developer. I'm pouring that in. It says to stir it with a clean plastic stir stick, so I just used a plastic knife that we had laying around after I washed it. You have to add 350 more milliliters to it. This is the developer, so.
Yeah, it's not all broken up yet.
Yeah. And as I'm stirring, I'm adding the rest of the distilled water to the mixture to top it off to 1,000 milliliters. It should be this color until it's all used up, and then it'll start to turn purple too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You can see it starts to clear up as I'm pouring in the water and mixing it with the plastic knife. Looks like apple juice. I got my developer funnel out and I'm getting ready to pour the mixture into the storage bottle. And that's the color developer all done. Next, I just rinsed out the container that I mixed it in with soap and water. And you're going to want to clean the tool that you used to stir it with as well.
You have to heat this one up too?
Yep. 100 degrees like the last one.
Same amount? 100
Yep.
700 to 600 or 700?
Yeah, and then you add what's left to get it up to 1,000 as you're stirring it. But I guess you have to heat up the stuff you add too. I didn't do that for that. And then I read it and it said that, so. I'm sure it's not like
Right.
that big of a deal. It was at 100 degrees, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like 100 degrees isn't very much, but
And the process for mixing the Blix is similar to the first one, but there are 2 packets that you're going to have to open and mix in. So the first thing I did was measure out 500 milliliters of distilled water, because that's the maximum that my measuring cup would allow. And I poured that into the pot that I was using to heat up the water. And then I measure out 500 milliliters again and pour that in as well. And I do recommend that you wear gloves for this process. It's kind of stupid on my part to not throw on a pair of gloves while mixing these chemicals. But here I am just checking the temperature of the water. You want to get it up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit for both of these mixtures. Now I'm pouring that back into the measuring cup. I measured out the amount that I would be adding in, and then I poured the rest into the container where I was mixing. And then I opened up packet A for the Blix and poured that in. I'd also recommend maybe wearing a mask for this process, because the packets are powder and it definitely got up into the air and I was breathing it in, which I'm sure isn't good for me. So it says to stir this mixture and then pour it into the storage bottle. So packet A is already in, and I'm pouring it into the storage bottle. Now this part was a little bit tricky with the instructions. It said to pour the contents of packet marked part B while it was in the storage bottle. And this part creates an endothermic reaction for 5 minutes. It says to put it in the storage bottle and then add the contents of packet B.
Oh,
so
right.
I think I'm just going to pour it down the funnel. Which was kind of interesting to watch. There was a little bit of gas coming off of the top of the bottle, and it was definitely fizzing a lot. But I poured it in using the funnel because the top of my bottle isn't very wide. So I figured it might be easier to pour it in using the funnel itself.
Is that easier?
A little bit. And then once that was in, I set a timer on my phone and I waited the 5 minutes for it to go through the endothermic reaction. For 5 minutes.
Let me toss this.
Yeah, that's fine.
What kind of reaction does it have on here?
It says endothermic reaction for 5 minutes. And pour solution back and forth between the pitcher and the bottle while circulating top-off solution with water to make 1,000 milliliters.
How many do you gotta add?
I got it here.
Cool. Alrighty.
It's like fizzing.
Oh, is it?
Oh yeah, it's gassing too. You can just barely make it out there, but it was fizzing a lot and there was a little bit of gas coming off of the top there. So next on the instructions, it said to pour solution back and forth between the pitcher and the bottle. Yeah. And then the next step was, while circulating, top off the solution with water to make 1,000 milliliters. So I was pouring it back and forth between my container and the storage bottle. Definitely smells like Blix. And then I was mixing it and adding water to just top off the rest of the bottle there. Again, gloves would have been pretty useful in this process because I definitely got Blix on my skin. And there we are, that's the Blix completely mixed. After that, I just, I let both the chemicals sit for a couple of hours before I use them. Okay, so yesterday I shot this segment, and I lost the files for it, so I'm going to have to do it again. But I wanted to do a demonstration how to get your film out of the canister and into the developing tank. I think that this is one of the most daunting parts of learning how to develop your own film, because if you mess up, you ruin your film. But I wanted to open up a canister of film and show you exactly how it's done in the light. So I'm going to be ruining another roll of film to do so. And I ruined one yesterday, but those files got corrupted. So I'm wasting another roll of film to show you how this is done. I'm going to switch to a top-down view of this desk and walk through that process. So first thing you would do is you get your light tight bag or get into a room where there is no light. I'm obviously going to be skipping that step. I would load up all of these objects into my light tight bag. I'd leave the lid on my developing tank, like so. And then once everything's in there, I would grab my roll of film. And your roll of film, if you've already shot it, wouldn't usually have a tail sticking out of it like this. So I'll wrap that back in there. You're going to look for your roll of film. Once you got your roll of film, you're going to grab your film opening tool. And mine looks like this. Yours might look a little different, but they all work essentially the same way. It's like a bottle opener. You're going to look for the end of the film without the little nub. And pry on that side. I usually take the film in one hand so I can get a good grip on it, and then I pop the end open. These older rolls of film are a little bit harder to get open than newer rolls, I've always found. There we go. So the end is separated here. You're going to pull this off, toss it aside, and then I push on the bottom nub there to move the film up and pull it out. And then what you're going to do is open up your lid And newer film isn't going to be wound as tight as this. It's going to want to unspool, especially if it's already been shot. So you're gonna want to hold on to it pretty good and make sure that it doesn't make a mess in your bag. I would also recommend wearing gloves for this process, because you don't want to get a bunch of fingerprints all over the film. But obviously I don't care about this roll, so not really a big deal to me. You're gonna grab your spool, and if you're just doing one roll of film, I would only use one spool in the developing tank, so that when you pour in your developer, it's hitting just the film on the bottom. You don't want the film to be on top and then nothing to be on the bottom. You want to make sure that your film is on the bottom. Unless you're doing 2 rolls, then you just want to make sure that you fill this up good while you're developing. But anyway, get your spool out. If you're doing this on a table in a light tight room, you always want to make sure to set your spool on its side. While I was at school, I had set one down and it had rolled away from me, and I didn't know where it went, and that's never a fun thing. But if you're in the bag, it doesn't really matter all too much. It's not going to get away from you. The first thing you want to do to prepare the film is get a good hold of the end here. We're going to cut just this rounded piece off. So you want to cut just so it's flat along these edges. And that helps it be able to slide into the take-up spool a little bit better. And then once it's cut, you want to grab your spool, find the little notches, and start to slide the film in. Mine has little ball bearings in it. You want to go in past those ball bearings, and then this is the part where the gloves come in handy, so when you touch your film you don't get fingerprints all over it. I usually have the piece that moves, the piece of the reel that moves, in my right hand, and I lightly touch the film as I'm rotating it to feed it up onto the spool. And with the rest of the roll, I usually hold in my hand as I'm doing this, so it doesn't unspool in the bag and make a giant mess. And then you're just going to slowly feed it in. And if you feel any tension at all, like if this won't turn or it feels like it's kinking up, I recommend just pulling it out, and it should come out relatively easily. Sometimes, see, like that, it'll just pull right out of there, and then you can just start over. That's only if you feel any tension. The tension caused by the spool can crinkle your film and it can leave marks in your images. And I've had a couple of rolls of film actually ruined by going into the spool in the wrong direction. Starting over, pull past the ball bearings. See, that almost unspooled. You want to make sure you're holding onto the film, and then just slowly guide it up onto the spool as you're turning it. Until you reach the end. The end here's got a little bit of tape on it, and you should be able to feel that when you're doing this yourself. Grab your scissors and cut just before the tape. So we cut off that whole end piece, like so. And then I'm going to spool it up the rest of the way so it's past there. And I usually leave this piece in my developing tank so I know where it is. I can easily find it. I'm going to slide this onto here, throw your film in, and then the lid for these goes in and then it turns clockwise until you hear a click, and then you know that your film's not going to fall out and you're ready to develop. I got my lid here. Yeah, I definitely recommend, if you can, to try this process out in the light before you do it for real, because it can be pretty stressful. And remember not to rush. Sometimes it can feel like a race while you're doing it, but take your time. Start over if you need to start over. You can start over as many times as you want. Now I've got 2 more rolls of film that I have to develop. And in the next segment, I'm going to be doing that. One last thing I forgot to mention before we develop is you want to hang on to these, because when your film's hanging up to dry, it tends to want to bend itself. So while it's hanging up to dry, imagine that this is the end of the film. We're going to hang it right on the end of it so that it holds it relatively straight while it's drying. The next thing I'm going to be doing is loading up my film into my developer tank, developing tank, and get ready to develop these 2 rolls of film. I got 2 rolls of Kodak Gold 200. I think something that I also should add is the ISO does not matter when you're developing color film. So you could put an 800 ISO film in with a 200 ISO film. It doesn't matter, the developing times are the same. And I know that's different for black and white. That being said, you could put whatever ISO film you want together in a dev tank. So I'm gonna get my light tight bag, these, my scissors, and my opener. I'm gonna put those on the left side. I usually put those on the left side so I know where they're at. Bit of Velcro to make sure that no light's getting in there. Move this back a little bit. And this light tight bag in particular has armholes in the front of it, so I can just stick my arms through, and they kind of cinch down around my wrists so I know no light is getting in. Okay, so I found my 2 rolls of film. I'm going to keep one towards the back. I'm going to get my opener. Perfect. And I'm lining up the pry tool. We're going to open up this first roll. First try. Nice. Got that open. I'll let it unroll itself a little bit because it's wanting to spring out of my hand. I'm going to grab the scissors, make my cut. This cut doesn't have to be the straightest thing in the world either. Don't stress. I'm taking the lid off the dev tank. Grab my first spool there. Finding those little notches. My dogs are barking. I don't even know if you can hear that. Probably. They're pretty loud. Okay, now I'm feeding the film on past those little ball bearings. I'm starting to spool it up now. It's going pretty smooth. I don't think I have any kinks or anything in mine. Cool. At the end of the roll now, I'm going to make my cut at the end here. Sweet. You want to make sure you cut before that tape line. Because if the tape gets in the chemicals, it can leave marks on your film as well. Sweet. Got my first reel on the reel holder now. That's going back in the tank. Got my second reel out, sitting in front of me here. And I'm going to open up my second roll of film. Gotta get it first try this time too. We will see. If I can get it lined up, I could. There we go. Yep, first try. The newer rolls of film are always a bit easier to open up than older rolls, I think, anyway. Alright, I'm gonna make my cut. Cut the front piece off of the film here. Perfect, that one feels pretty straight. And I got my second reel in my hand, finding those little points where it sticks out there. Alright, cool. I'm going to feed in my start of my film there. Past those ball bearings. Now, this one feels crooked. I'm going to take it back out, try again. I'm a little stuck on the side there. And it's a little bit harder to tell where everything is when you got, you know, latex gloves on and everything. But you really don't want to put fingerprints on your film at this point. I think that's on there. No, it's not. So you can be a little tricky sometimes, especially when your whole roll is trying to unravel itself in your hand, like mine currently. I think this roll sat in a camera for a while, so it's kind of finicky. So it was rolled in the opposite direction than it is in the canister for so long. Ah, there we go. I think I got it this time. Move my scissors out of the way so I can set this down. Right now, I don't have the roll in my hand. I actually have it resting on the table so it won't unravel. Sometimes I keep it in my hand, sometimes I just let it hang under the table until it's all the way spooled up. Now this one I'm feeling like a slight bit of tension, but I don't think it's anything to be worried about. Like, it feels pretty straight, so I'm not going to start over unless it crinkles up. Which it seems like it might be doing right now. I can't really tell. Could just, oh, we're at the end of the roll. That might be why. I'm going to cut the end off. There it goes. Yep. Rolled up the rest of the way super easy. And I got my lid. Lid is on. Clicked. And good to go. The more you do this process, the easier it's gonna get. See, I cut a little bit too far on this one. I wouldn't recommend going that far. I might have cut into a frame. Probably not, though. I mean, it's possible. No, I probably didn't. This is what the cuts from the front look like. We're going to hold on to these to weigh down the film while it's drying. And there might be a little tiny bit of that tape on my film too, but I'm not too worried about it. I tried my best. Sweet. This is all locked up. Ready to go. I will see you in my bathroom. I'm in my bathroom. I'm going to start warming up the chemicals and get them up to temperature so that we can develop. First thing I like to do is lay out some paper towels because these chemicals are not good for your skin and they're not good for your body and they can make you very sick. So I like to make sure that I don't get them on anything in here. Then I rip one off for me to wipe off my hands. Oh, actually, before we start warming up the chemicals, I like to start with a pre-rinse for the film. So I get the sink up to like, I don't know, around 85, 90 degrees. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me very well over the sink, but I'm going to throw my gloves on. I'll just rinse once. Cool. Alright, then I'll grab my color developer and my Blix. Make sure the caps are on nice and tight. I'll set them in my sink. And then I will run hot water on full blast over them and periodically take the temperature until it gets up to 102 degrees for this powder kit. Most of these kits come with their own instructions. And I think the liquid kit that I used the last time required a 103 degree temperature. So it's not much different, but there might be variation if you're using a different type of kit or something. So check your instructions. Okay, so I think it's just about up to temp now. Take it out and check it. We are a little off. Let's come back in. part can be a little boring and time consuming. So, I usually play music and listen to a podcast or something while I'm doing this. We are like right at 100 degrees. Yep, 102. Okay, let me take my Blix, set it down here. I'm gonna get my developer funnel. I don't know if you can see that, but I have everything labeled so I don't mix up funnels. I suggest you do the same. It's important to not mix those up. And I'm going to set a timer on my phone. I'm going to set a timer on my phone for 3 minutes 30 seconds because that's the developing time. I'm going to pour in our developer. Careful not to splash it on anything. Start the timer, and then we agitate for the first 10 seconds. So, this is how I agitate. Everybody seems to do it a little bit differently. I usually rotate it with one hand. And I always hit it on the sink a couple times to get the air bubbles off of the film. And then we agitate for 10 seconds every minute after the first 10 seconds. So we're at 2:30 now. Agitate for 10 seconds. You want to make sure your lid's good and on there so you don't lose any of your developer or end up getting the Blix all over the place. It can make a mess pretty quick. But you definitely want to wear gloves for this whole process. 1 minute 30. Seconds. And then I'll usually agitate at the 45-second mark for the last minute, so I have time to get the lid off and get ready to pour it back into the bottle. Take the lid off. Set that aside for now. I'm going to cancel my timer at 5 seconds and then start pouring it back in. Sweet. And I hold the funnel with one hand slightly above so the air can get out of the bottle as I'm pouring it in. Of course it overflowed a little bit because of the bubbles. That's why we put paper towels down. Okay, we'll get that in here. I'll rinse out my funnel. And this part is time sensitive, but I don't like to rush too much. blicks out. And this one goes in for 8 minutes. There we go. This one you really want to make sure not to get anywhere. This stuff is wild. Cool. Start the timer. Sweet. Agitate for the first 10 seconds like the last one. Funnel for the blicks. I'm gonna get a new paper towel. Perfect. And this stuff is, sometimes it creates a little bit of air inside of the container. So I crack the edge of it and let the air out so it doesn't blow the lid off of there. 5:30. And I have a jar, bottle rather, of, it's labeled stabilizer, but it's just photo flow. Newer rolls of film have a stabilizer like built into the film, so it's not something you have to worry about if you're shooting film that's in date. But if you were shooting like expired film or older film, I definitely recommend picking up some photo flow so that you don't ruin your film. But this two-step process is nice for newer film stocks. Four minutes to go. Alright, when that gets to like 40 seconds or 35-ish, I'm going to agitate one more time and then take the lid off and get ready to pour it back in the bottle. And these kits are reusable up to like, I think I got 23 rolls of film on my last one, and I was doing medium format and 35 mil. So I don't know what they're rated for, like what they recommend, but I definitely got a lot of rolls out of the last one that I had. Stuff smells so bad. this. Start pouring it out. Pour on the, at least try to pour on this side of the funnel so that it doesn't splash and get everywhere. Alright. And now, we're good to start. I'll leave that for a second. We're good to start the final rinse. And I usually try to rinse for about 5 minutes. I mean, the temperature of the water doesn't really matter. So I'll just turn on both and let it rinse for 5 minutes. I'll leave it sit for a sec. Should be pretty good after this one. Yeah, it looks pretty clear. I'm gonna pop my lid off. Sweet. Alright. I'll grab my old canisters and some little clips, clothespins, whatever you want to call them. And grab the end of the film. Gently. Sometimes they don't want to come out very easily. They usually pull pretty nicely. This one's finicky. Okay, guess we're just gonna have to roll it. There we go. Sweet. Alright. We'll hang this one up with a clothespin. I won't be able to show you, but I usually take the film in between 2 fingers of my gloves and I'll squeegee down the whole thing to get the water droplets off as it dries. I don't know if you're supposed to do that. Probably not. You risk scratching the film most likely, but that's what I do. Usually go like this down the whole thing. Maybe once or twice. Just to get a lot of the water off of it. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm just waiting for that film to dry. And when it's all done, I'll bring it up here and we can cut it and put it into film archival sleeves. I'll show you how I do that. And then it'll be ready to scan. I'm gonna check. Should take a couple hours to dry, but I'm going to check it periodically anyway. And we'll see when it's dry. Okay, back at the desk, and film is dry. I'm going to be cutting it up and putting it into these sleeves. These sleeves are 5 exposure sleeves, so I'll be cutting the film every 5 exposures to fit across these sleeves, if that makes sense. It'll probably make more sense once you see it. I'm going to be doing this roll first, but there's an issue with the first frame. Some overlapping, but I didn't take these photos, so I don't know what that issue might have been. I'm still going to cut it every 5. Just to make sure they fit. And that's just the beginning of the roll. Okay, sit down. I should probably be wearing gloves for this, but I'm usually pretty careful about holding onto the edges, making sure I don't touch the film. You just want to gently slide them in. Don't want to bend it. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Got another roll to do, and that will be the 4th roll that I've developed since I've mixed these chemicals. It can be a little tricky sometimes to get the cut just right. You really want to make sure you don't cut into any of your frames. At school, I would do this process on a light table so I could easily see the in-betweens frames. If you look close on this one, it's really, I don't even know if you could see it. It's really hard to see the line between these 2 frames. I can just make it out very faintly here. 2, 3, 4, 5. I might need to split this one up between 2 sleeves. I do have some watermarks on this film from the drying process, and I've never really had that happen before. But I have always used photo flow. So for these 2 rolls of film, I didn't use photo flow. So that could be because I didn't use photo flow. I don't know if you can see them. If I can get the reflection just right. You can kind of see the water, the dried watermarks. So I might have to clean up this film before I scan it. But if you don't want marks on your film, I'd recommend picking up photo flow and mixing it into another bottle like I did. And the process for that's pretty straightforward. You just pour it into your film after you do your final wash, and then I think you agitate for 15 seconds and then let it sit for 15 seconds, and then it's good to go. I'm going to do kind of a big no-no. I don't really care about these photos too much, and I'm lazy, and I'm just going to slide this last row of photos in with the other ones. Sweet. Now I don't have to go get another sleeve. Alright. All done. Okay. Well, that's how I do it. That's how I develop film in my house. Really hope that this was helpful for somebody. I know it can kind of be a scary thought to venture into this kind of thing, but if you are looking to get into it, I'd say go for it. In the description should be a list of the things that you'll need. I know I said that earlier in the video, but I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I really do hope it was helpful. I like to do this kind of thing. I like to teach, and I like to be a resource like this for people. If you have any questions, you can for sure leave them in the comments. I don't have a very large following, so I'm sure I'll be able to answer any questions that anybody has. And if you made it this far and you enjoyed watching this, or it was helpful in some way for you, definitely leave a like. That would mean a lot to me. I put a lot of time and work into this. That would be nice. If you didn't like something, feel free to dislike. I mean, like, that's what it's there for. But I would also really appreciate if you could leave a comment telling me what it is that you didn't like, because I'm very new to this and I would absolutely love some constructive criticism. But yeah, stay tuned for some really cool upcoming stuff. I have a plan to do a giveaway that I'm not going to say any specifics about, but it should be really cool and I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah. I don't know how to close these things.